How do we deal with toxic, negative people? I've gotten this question previously and wanted to address it. It's interesting. Toxic, negative people, they are actually our gurus. They are our teachers. They are showing us where we're still holding on, where we're still attached to our somebodyness, our ego. Because the reason we get triggered by people is because we think we're somebody. We think these things are happening to us. We think we're somebody doing something. We think we're in control. We think other people are in control. All these things are products of the thinking mind, right? So when people say things to us, we get triggered by them because we think we're somebody and we think they're somebody and we think they're in control. As opposed to what? As opposed to just being nature running off their chemistry and conditioning. I had a woman randomly verbally assault me in a parking lot recently for basically nothing. I just parked in the spot. The story doesn't matter. And I felt myself get a little triggered because she was like, "You an asshole! You an asshole! Well, what? I said, oh, have a nice day." And she goes, "Man, fuck you, motherfucker." Anyway, it doesn't matter, right? But she was going at me hard, and I felt a little triggered. But then I was like, I really didn't care. I kind of thought it was funny. But what keeps us, what holds us down, what really gets us going when we have toxic, negative people in our lives, and they're really aggravating us and they're really stressing us and giving us anxiety, this is a sign we need to practice presence and purification, which correct all imbalances. Because every second we're present, we're dissolving the ego. And the ego is what's keeping us attached to our somebodyness, which is why we're getting triggered by people. And what's interesting is the more we practice presence and purification, the more we raise our vibration, and negative people, like bad habits or things we do to cope with being out of balance, they start to fall away. They start to fall away the more we come in balance, because it just doesn't. Because what are we trying to do? Facilitate a state of peace, so we can, which helps us stay present more, which is how we surrender, give it all up to God and allow the divine to flow through us. So this is the goal, right? As much presence as possible. So as we raise our vibration, these toxic negative people will naturally fall off. In addition to, the more we're present, the more, and purification aids presence, helps us calm the mind and body. The more we're present, the more we dissolve the ego. So the less we're going to be affected by toxic, negative people, and the less toxic and negative they become to us. They just become there. They're just there because we've learned we've diminished the ego enough to not be affected by them and realize that they are just their chemistry and their conditioning running off, their nature running off. They could not act any other way. The only thing we can possibly do is what we do, because whatever happens was always going to happen because it happens. Nothing else was ever going to happen because we were simply nature running off. And when we stop thinking and then stop identifying with our somebodyness, our ego, we start to observe this nature running off. And then this helps us detach from thinking things are happening to us and that we're somebody doing something, which allows us not to be affected by these toxic, negative people. So this is kind of the process that I experienced directly in my own life. I had a very toxic and negative guru in my life, one of my greatest teachers, because if we're very much affected and stressed out by toxic, negative people, it can put us in a cycle of suffering, right? So I had a guru so toxic and so negative, it forced my being to find a way to deal with it. Pharmaceuticals were not working. Forgive me, my smoke alarm likes to randomly go off for no reason, and I had to silence it. So as I was saying, the pharmaceuticals were not working. So my being was forced to practice presence of purification, basically. And this started correcting my imbalances. And as we dissolve the ego through surrender, through presence, and our attachment, our identification with our somebodyness, these toxic and negative people, which are just people, chemistry and conditioning running off, but we think we're somebody and we think we're in control, so we get affected by it. As we practice presence and purification, their effect on us diminishes greatly until it's non-existent. I had this very toxic and negative guru, and eventually, as I was practicing presence and purification, their effect on me diminished to a much lower and lower levels until they fell out of my life completely. Because as you raise our vibration, these people will fall away, because we continue on a path of spiritual evolution, which allows us to enter greater and greater states of presence, which is full surrender to our cosmic beloved, which allows God to work through us, allows us to be our higher self, the center of the circle. Stand in the center of the circle and allow all things to take their course. When we do this, these toxic and negative people, they're no longer toxic. I've had many experiences with this directly. As we continue on this path, their effect on us diminishes. This is how we deal with them, by doing nothing, being the observer, and dissolving our attachment to the ego so they don't affect us. And we realize, and we become the observer, and we realize we're just nature running off. Everybody is. Chemistry and conditioning. No one's doing anything. You can't judge anyone for doing anything. Judgment assumes control, right? If you're judging somebody for doing something, that assumes that they have a choice. There is no choice. We just think we're the actor. We think we're somebody doing something. We think we're in control. What happens when we stop thinking? Poof, it all goes away. And we become the observer, and we realize we're just nature running off. So I hope this is helpful for you, my friends. I know I'm just merely sharing my perspective and my experience. That's all I can do, right? Constantly surrendering, saying, I'm God's eternal love pouring forth. Why am I saying that? Because that is what we are when we're surrendered, fully surrendered. We're unconditional love. That's what Jesus was, because he was fully surrendered. He wasn't thinking. He was cosmic consciousness. He was meditating all the time. He learned how to meditate probably in Egypt, right? Or wherever it was, right? Or the Himalayas, wherever he went. Maybe it was India he went to. I don't know. He went to a mystery school. Maybe. Anyway, that's besides the point. Everything will come into balance with presence and purification. So if you're struggling in any area of your life, being stressed, being caught in a cycle of suffering, presence and purification will correct all imbalances, because we're dissolving our attachment to anything, like thinking we're in control, which is the cause of all our suffering. All suffering assumes control. This is why we suffer, because we think we're in control. We think we're somebody doing something. So become the observer. That's all. Remember, the only thing there is to do is nothing. Stop thinking and stop being attached to the game, getting caught in the illusion. And this is how we become free internally, in a sense, and this is how the world becomes free. We don't have to worry about what anybody else is doing. We're all on our own path, and as we raise our own vibration through the presence and purification, we're raising the vibration of the whole planet. So presence and purification covers all the bases. This is how we break free from the illusion, and this is how we help humanity break free from the cycles of suffering. I was headed toward, at one point, writing a book eventually to something of the effect of escaping the cycles of suffering through presence and purification and God's love, right? Something to this effect, which will come eventually as I become more balanced, because remember that life is basically about balance. We're doing things to cope with being out of balance, or we're in balance and we're in the present moment and we're allowing the divine to work through us. Our highest self, the Atman. Thank you for joining my friends. If you have any questions about anything I spoke about or would like to hear me speak about in something in particular, please feel free to ask questions. I may not make specific videos about every question, but I do try to implement some of the questions into my videos in different places to try to answer more questions at once and kind of address more than one thing at once. But please feel free to say hello, or, why do I make these videos? These videos are me reminding myself my conditioning needs to be reminded. So it is reminding my conditioning is like it's like a self-driving car, right? It keeps going. It's reminding me to stay present in presence and purification. And it's also reminding you, right? This is we're a self-lubricating machine here, whatever you want to call it, right? We just keep going. So it's keeping my conditioning is keeping my consciousness going. Because once you're on the path, it's self-correcting. You can think. Ram Dass talks about the same thing. Like, you're going to give up meditation. You're going to go get drunk at the bars every night. That's fine. Do it up. Get it out. Who cares? Just don't judge yourself. Let it happen. You ain't doing nothing anyway. Hey, you're just nature running off. Your chemistry and conditioning, no matter what's happening. Smoking it up. Going back and drinking beers. You fall back in some junk food when you're trying to eat better. It doesn't matter. Just observe. Just observe. That's your chemistry and conditioning dealing with being out of balance. That's all it is. That's your nature running off. It was always going to happen. Whatever happens was always going to happen because it happens. If you fall off, or as a conscious being, access levels of deeper understanding and these varying perspectives, if you fall off, you're not really falling off. It's just your chemistry and conditioning. It's a balancing act. It's going through. You're just observing it every time. Nature running off is a very important concept. I have many videos on nature running off. When we become the observer, stop thinking long enough, we realize we're nature running off. We're not doing anything. And this brings everything into balance, no matter what it is. I am God's eternal love pouring forth. Namaste.